All right, the Destroy Trump media absolutely refuses to follow the facts when it comes to the baseless claims of President Trump colluding with the Russians. Now, that's because these very radical, very rigid left-wing ideologues, it's clear they do not care about telling you, the American people, the truth. Their main objective is to smear, slander, besmirch President Trump, no matter what actual evidence exists or doesn't exist or what it shows. Now, these purveyors of very fake news are perfectly happy peddling their lies as long as it inflicts damage on President Trump or those close to him. They are willing to hyperventilate, breathlessly report, create a feeding frenzy after feeding frenzy, and push manufactured scandal after manufactured scandal, because the end goal and what this country is now up against is very, very simple here. The propaganda Destroy Trump media, they want President Trump to fail, and they want him out. They want him gone. They want him out of office. They want him impeached. Now, this Russia conspiracy theory narrative is a perfect example. The media has been running with this lie with no evidence for months and months and months. They have nothing. The media won't tell you that because they're hoping upon hope that their endless lies may eventually come to some smidgen of truth, or they'll just make it up. Now, as we've been showing you, this narrative has been crumbling right in front of their faces, but they refuse to let it go. So tonight, it is time for a reality check, and I hope you share it with your friends. We will do the media's job for them and lay out truth and facts. Now, let's start with former Obama CIA Director John Brennan testifying yesterday on Capitol Hill and admitting no evidence of collusion. Watch this.
I encountered and am aware of information and intelligence that revealed contacts and interactions between Russian officials and U.S. persons involved in the Trump campaign that I was concerned about because of known Russian efforts to suborn such individuals, and it raised questions in my mind, again, whether or not the Russians were able to gain the cooperation of those individuals. I don't know whether or not such collusion, that's your term, such collusion existed. I don't know. But I know that there was a sufficient basis of information and intelligence that required further investigation by the Bureau to determine whether or not U.S. persons were actively conspiring, colluding with Russian officials.
After all these months, no evidence of collusion? And by the way, that was not the only major revelation from the former director, and that's Director Brennan. When asked about the propaganda media's reporting that President Trump shared classified information with the Russians in the Oval Office, he admitted the same thing. Watch this.
I shared classified information with the Russians while I was director of CIA. CIA, on a routine basis, shares classified information with Russians on terrorism matters. It doesn't mean that it becomes unclassified. It means that it retains the classification, but is releasable then to Russia or to other partners. So that in itself is not unprecedented. And I don't know what was shared or said in the Oval Office, but if the reports in the press are true that Mr. Trump decided to spontaneously share some intelligence with the Russians, I think he would have basically violated two protocols.
We also have President Obama's former Director of National Intelligence, James Clapper, back in March. He's on the all-important Meet the Press show saying the same thing. Watch this.
We did not include any evidence in our report, and I say our, that's NSA, FBI, and CIA with my office, the Director of National Intelligence, that had anything that had any reflection of collusion between members of the Trump campaign and the Russians. There was no evidence of that included in our report.
I understand that, but does it exist?
Not to my knowledge.
Now, on top of that, key Democrats, this is my favorite, Congresswoman Maxine Waters also, you know, one of the leading voices to impeach President Trump, have all had to admit and come clean and say the same thing. And they've seen no evidence of Russia collusion. Take a look.
The last time we spoke, Senator, I asked you if you had actually seen evidence of collusion between the Trump campaign and the Russians, and you said to me, and I'm quoting you now, you said, not at this time. Has anything changed since we spoke last?
Well, no, it hasn't.
I know we need to go soon, but just to be clear, there has been no actual evidence yet.
No, it has not been.
Okay. I just want
no,
to
it has not.
No evidence? Maxine Waters, Dianne Feinstein, all those people? Here's the serious part. This is what's so alarming about all this and why I am now calling this the biggest media scandal in the history of our republic. All of the facts that we just laid out for you have been completely ignored by the Destroy Trump media. Now, these people are impervious to the truth. They avoid it like the plague. They'd rather push a total, complete fabrication, made-up conspiracy theory, and that's what's going on in the country right now. It's sort of like a version of insanity is broken out. Now, take a look at how the media has pushed this false Russia collusion narrative, as Maxine Waters said, with no evidence.
Wouldn't it be nice if it was just completely, totally, absolutely impossible to suspect that Vladimir Putin orchestrated what happened in Syria this week so that his friend in the White House could have a big night with missiles and all of the praise he's picked up over the last 24 hours? Wouldn't it be so nice if you couldn't even in your wildest dreams imagine a scenario like that?
I'll say it again. This Russian connection just keeps building, and every time it builds and expands, you have to wonder if Trump himself isn't worried about what's swirling around under the covers.
CNN has learned new details of the FBI investigation into potential links between individuals associated with the Trump campaign and the Russian government.
Specifically, Willie, I think what it means is that a federal judge found that people in Trump's organization were colluding with the Russians.
This is now beyond disgraceful. And by the way, this is the same media that WikiLeaks proved colluded with the Hillary Clinton campaign, and they're willing to go so off the deep end and push these ridiculous theories that, again, we have no evidence for, and so far has been proven false. Now, this is the question I want to ask tonight. President Obama and the Democrats are so concerned about Russia meddling. Well, then why did they wait until after President Trump was elected to make such a big deal about it? And by the way, if it was so alarming and so egregious and posed such a major threat to our democracy, well, don't you think they should have said something before the election? Now, according to the former CIA director, Mike Morrell, it turns out that President Obama did nothing to stop Russian interference. And remember, there was also testimony out there that said they did it in previous elections and they'll do it in future elections. Take a look.
So what struck me, Charlie, is that the U.S. government was concerned enough last summer about Russian interference in the election that they had the CIA director make contact with his Russian counterpart and tell them to stop. And the Russians clearly didn't. So my question is, what did the Obama administration do after that, after they learned that the warning had fallen on deaf ears?
Well, it appears they did nothing.
It appears they did nothing.
And finally tonight, let me say this. If it turns out that someone from inside the DNC, for example, somebody that supported Bernie Sanders or was frustrated that there was collusion and corruption and a denial of a free and open election process as it relates to the primary with Hillary Clinton, if something like that happened, wouldn't that blow the entire Russia collusion theory out the window? And isn't that something they may be afraid of?